10:02, and we are here for a meeting with the clerk's office. With that, we'll turn it over to Jessica.
Okay, so I think first on the hit list, actually even before you really look at that proposal, is how we're addressing long-term vacancies. So I think there was some talk in the beginning that if positions had been open for 6 months or more consistently, that we would consider, for budgeting purposes, removing half. Is that still the board's intent and position?
What other options would we have? Not doing any?
Well,
Correct.
based on Government Finance Office of Accounting and good budget practices, if the item has not been filled within 3 months when you're opening the budget, you drop it down by 50%. That is,
So I'm just confirming that.
Yep, that sounds good.
I just heard 3 months and 6 months. I'm more comfortable
No.
with the 6 month.
Well,
Three-
either way, I
3
mean,
months before the opening of the budget. If that's, when you do your call for budget, if it's open 3 months before that, it's not likely to get filled. And so they recommend a reduction of the value of that particular position. I think that there's a little bit of difference on positions where we have not been competitive to attract being filled by reducing those. But in general, like the law enforcement ones that have been there for 3 years,
yeah, I mean, they average 6 to 8 positions being open and unfilled in each department consistently 12 months out of the year. So 6 for the sheriff, 6 to 8 for the sheriff, 6 to 8 for jail consistently, right? So there'll be some ebbs and flows, but the reality is in the last 12 months, they've onboarded 2 deputies.
Out of over 100 applications.
So I have nothing to say about that. I'm just, for
No, it's
money
just-
wise.
We just need to make
I
decisions
would
based on the
think that
data.
between 3 and 4 is where they should be living
Well, if
for
there's
budgeting purposes.
what was the name of that organization you? just put in?
GFOA,
Yeah, if they have a standard, I think we should.
follow that.
Yeah, why are we creating our own wheel?
Oh, no, that's just it, 50%. So I'll get with HR, we'll confirm those numbers. They're verifying vacancies right now for my proposals, because Munis double tapped some of the vacancies when we pulled it. So we're verifying which vacancies are truly in effect, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the benchmarking that you all got from HR 2 weeks ago, I printed it out just so I'd have it in front of me. But what I'm asking for you guys, so first of all, their recommendations are either step or grade changes, right, for these listed positions. And then they gave us kind of, if we just did placement +1 or placement +2. They don't have a specific recommendation within that. So I need you guys to tell me where we're landing for all of these positions.
so I had a position on HR and benchmarking because you don't look every single year, and we are trying to secure a person who would take on the role of HR director. And my request to the board is to consider not messing with HR's benchmarking. We've identified that we're going to do a step increase with the availability of additional. We have too many jobs in the county where people have changed the job descriptions. Essentially, I'll just say it the way it feels on some of these. The job description has changed to justify an increased rate, and sometimes we're not comparing them to what the industry standard is based on best practices. It's just someone else is making more, or people can't afford to live, which is not how you build the foundation. And I'd like to task the HR director with the first year project of looking at job descriptions, rates of pay, not this continued, let's change it based on benchmarking, because we don't do it you're not supposed to do it every single year. And some of the things that they're changing are like HR's positions, those are some big jumps that I'm seeing on their requests. I think that a thorough review of all positions, not just positions that are piecemealed and in line with, this is the year where we have to look at again for the majority of these. We're not doing that. It's people that say, my person is doing extra.
These were positions that departments brought to HR saying that there's a discrepancy.
And that's HR is supposed to be doing a function, and for years, that's part of the inequity across the organization is people come and they just want to bump their individual people when HR has to address, this job is worth this much. If the same person stays in that job, you don't pay that person more than the job is worth. It's you're choosing to stay versus to grow kind of a thing. We don't know where that is because every single year we go through executive sessions of bumping people's rates of pay up. And then people make a job description versus what was the FTE that you were given to work with, not the one that you created to change the job. So I would like to see HR actually look at it across the board on everyone so that we can address it, not that it's just based on a list of people that feel that theirs are worth more.
Address it correctly.
Yes. And that's part of what we are trying to agree to increase our offer for, is to get somebody that would focus on that. And because that is what we're putting our money in, we are going to be able to give an increase across the board that can address it. I think it's not fair to those, and I want to say there are some offices like the treasurer who have said, well, we've had a couple budgets in a row where it's not fair that we were told no enhancements this year, but these people came in and they got this. We're always creating inequity in the organization, and we have to pick a time, and I think now is the right time, since we can give a bump, that we say, we need to fix this correctly, because it's also negatively impacting our ability to attract people and to retain people in the organization, because you can tell which departments have had better pull with the Board of Commissioners based on kind of some rate to pay, and that needs to get stopped. People need to know they can depend on it, and that we're equitably distributing money. So that's my vote, is to not address their issue. And I know that there are some departments that want us to push to say, well, fix this, we've asked for years, but there are people that equally have an argument that say, well, they've never been high in the vision of commissioners to even be considered. And I think I could reasonably say, as we go through the next fiscal year, if the new director starts with, let me start with this group of people, and they do that benchmarking, then allowing that person to come to the board and say, I looked at the mechanics. These people need to be changed based on it. Then we can do that based on objective benchmarking verification. Right now, I don't feel like that's what has been presented to the board. I think we can make changes throughout the year with doing it the right way. I feel like just changing based on what they presented is not the right way.
So I agree, but at the same time, do we also want to recognize the ones that we know are not in the correct step or grade, and address those? It's not, to me, that's not benchmarking, that's just that somehow they did get put to where they need to be.
In some ways, we don't really know the answer because we don't have the formula by which that was actually created to know where they sit. And some people, I think, if we're moving everybody A grade, there is movement that will happen for everybody. But how do we pick which ones are not in the right grade if we don't have somebody that actually goes through the class? And maybe a way of addressing that is to say, let's look at the classes first, like to take priority and say, this is a group that has argued that they are not correct first, and that we task the director with start here, but that we don't make the change until that's received. And if we get that information, then what we say is we're going to anticipate that we're going to have to make a change once that gets presented in the next fiscal year, but not that we change it without that confirmation, because then we'll be chasing ourselves, because if you raise people higher than they're supposed to be, then they're going to say, it's not fair that I'm red circled. That's not my fair. That's not fair to me. We would be shooting in the dark if we don't actually address it through an HR honest review of benchmarking. There are people like the clerks who feel that they are not set correctly, and maybe you address them by saying, once we get HR up and running, the priority of what we review will start with the clerks, and then picking it and then having that review.
So do we want to make our decisions null and void on the ones that we've already gone through.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. So like there was a lot of
enhancements.
tentative approvals based on the HR benchmarking, right? It's approved, yes, per HR's recommendation. And that was on this benchmarking sheet. So are we going to pause?
If we're gonna do it, we need to do it across the board because it's not fair.
Well, some of the people were not benchmark changed, well, they were changed because of there was some other data that addressed it.
Placement, so here, if I understood correctly, and I want to be sure we don't miss this.
Yeah,
We had multiple categories of compensation to consider. And the first one, and what I heard us say all along, was people who were initially placed in the new step and grade, there was acknowledgement that some of them were not placed correctly and that those were going to be corrected in this new budget. And that was going to be our
Right.
top priority, to make those corrections.
and so
I want to be sure we follow through with that.
So,
But that's
That's
different,
different than
that's not the
benchmarking.
benchmarking.
I agree,
She's
that's what I'm saying,
asking
they're
about
separate
benchmarking.
categories,
Well,
but I want to make sure this hasn't
so
gotten
I
confused.
think there was some kind of overlap. So a lot of these positions, according to HR, were not placed in the proper grades. These positions on this tier 1 sheet, the 5 sheets that I have here, these positions HR has determined were not properly placed and they deserve a grade increase. I have some problem with specifics on that, but in relation to the court clerks, because we were able to show quite effectively, I think, that positions within the court's office would be comparable to those positions at the prosecutor's
So
office.
Ken, what I want to be fair on is, we're not arguing on the different cases here
Yeah.
because there's disagreement on this. It's a question of how do you proceed? And so I don't think that, so the benchmarking that, there is a difference on the benchmarking versus they weren't in the correct grade. The ones that got moved, like that when we were going through like the mechanic from the sheriff's office, that's not the same as benchmarking question. Her, like the HR assessment of their office is increased to, I think it's $30-something an hour. That's benchmarking. That's where they're comparing it to essentially a survey saying that these jobs are worth more. And quite frankly, part of what I don't like about the way it's presented is it's just numbers without, what is the data that's used that I'm supposed to use to interpret that, your
Right.
role? And then and I'm picking on the HR one, is there's a discrepancy of, it's the same job title, yet you're saying it's worth different throughout the organization, but the work in theirs is very high. Some people are in the same position and it's a lower one. How do we decide? That's where I'm saying we need actual HR to address those things.
And I agree, more data to make that decision for benchmarking. I think a more thorough review, I completely agree with you guys on. But to me, it is different to say if somebody was initially, so individual staff were initially placed incorrectly when the new system was adopted last year. That's what I've been told happened for certain staff, and that we were going to correct those issues in this budget.
Right.
That's the piece I want to be sure we follow
So
through
that's
on.
what I'm asking. So a lot of that.
Not a
like-
whole group, not a whole department, not individual people that were incorrectly placed.
So, well, okay, so
Because there's a
I guess-
difference,
Okay.
right?
So how about this
I'm
is, so
sorry,
this
Jessica,
is,
but
so this is the
we have to
question.
get granular here.
So the question then to HR is, show the people that were not placed in the grade, and it's not a benchmarking question, it's just they were not placed in the right grade.
Yeah,
For example,
it's not a
that's what we
comparison
did
to the
with,
market. We just didn't do it in the right place.
and that's what happened with GIS people, didn't get pulled in the correct grade, and we had to fix that. And so the question is for them to segregate to segregate what is a grade fix versus you're asking for essentially a labor market survey that you're saying justifies that someone's not paid at their correct rate. We're not looking at those ones, but looking at the people that we know are not paid based on where they should have been placed in when it started. And that's what she hasn't clearly said. So let's ask that question. And I think the agreement from this board is, once she presents that list and shows that Asia should have been a grade 1 this year, but she was placed as, or a grade 2 and was placed as a grade 1, we didn't do that correctly, so that person needs to be moved. That's the ones we're agreeing to move. The ones that where we're talking about a comparison based on the market, those are not, in my opinion, we shouldn't accept, because we should have a thorough HR review of the market, the job description, and what was authorized. And it's exactly what we're experiencing with the Fair Board of, we authorized a job of a very specific one, and they're being paid for something that far exceeds what was authorized. Just because someone says, I'm doing more work, doesn't mean that's what the FTE was designed for either, which we equally have to address that, because some people use that as a reason to increase the rate.
So can we go down that list of people that we think are not placed correctly and?
I mean, I honestly wouldn't even know where
She
to
wouldn't
start
know, it's an HR
with
one.
That's-
that,
yeah,
because
so-
it's significant. So like,
I thought you might
there's
have
a ton,
list.
I mean, there's a.
We don't know if it's all
there's a-
sitting on the
there's
enhancement
a
sheet or not.
ton- And they're not all sitting on the enhancement sheet, right? Like the court clerks specifically are not on the enhancement sheet.
So we addressed the ones on the enhancement sheets, and so I
Well,
think,
yes, but you also said, yes, go with HR's recommendation,
On
which
some
was
of-
based on the benchmarking.
not all
right?
of those were based on benchmarking. Some of them, so what we agreed to is one, but the question for what she's asking just requires us to ask Rosemary, show us who was not originally placed in the correct step and grade. Identify those people and provide the objective evidence that shows that, and then we would just be sending that over to Jessica saying, these people can move.
I agree, because my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, coming into office when this question was asked by me was that, because we had some individual departments coming in and saying, we have a problem with someone, and the answer I heard was that those that were identified and the people were told that they wouldn't be addressed mid-year, they'd be addressed in the
At the
next budget year.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so I'm trying to capture that group of people in whatever method is necessary to follow through on that commitment by the county to correct those.
Right, so,
And then, because we have to do that before we make any other decisions about if there's going to be a general across the board step increase for people who qualify, because otherwise we're continuing to leave people behind and they're losing ground that they
And they're
shouldn't
losing money
lose.
in the
Yeah.
year that they don't have the equity.
So are we gonna ask HR to provide that list for us?
Yes, so we can send that email, and then the board can, in this setting, we're saying that we can just forward it on to Jessica and say, these are the ones that we're going to change. Whatever we approve based on enhancements, that's what we agreed to, and then we'll address how we're going to address all staff and equity outside of that. I do know there are people that, like for Teddy sitting here, and I'm just gonna make some assumptions, she's got a one person in that position, but that she's wanting to get addressed. I don't feel like that's addressing the budget. I think she's trying to address a current staffing issue right now with the board, and I think that's outside of a budget discussion. So my request is to have her bring her employee issue the way we've done other employee issues in executive session for this current cycle, because that's what she's trying to address. It will impact her next budget cycle, but she's trying to fix, she's not adding something, she's trying to address a current event issue. And so when Commissioner Korn and I were in the budget discussion, I had said to her, go to HR and address the issue, because we're talking about a now issue. They pushed her back to this kind of meeting, and I'd like us to agree that she just needs to come to us with what she's talking about.
just schedule an
Just- yeah.
executive
So
session.
it's an issue
it's
with
a-
a current staff
Yeah.
member and it's a current issue.
Yeah.
And I
It is.
agree, it should be an
Yes.
exec and we should address that specific issue about that staff.
So can you just ask for,
Jessica, can I
to
please
put it
see
on
your
an agenda so that we
I'm
can
sorry,
talk about your issue and
benchmark.
make a decision?
Here.
I've got an email somewhere, but
Yeah,
thank you.
And so I think on any of the enhancements that were benchmarked, I think we should put those on hold. I don't think it's fair that someone got in before somebody else did, and somebody is going to get adjusted by benchmarking when we're saying that we're not going to benchmark everyone else. That is not right.
So I'm going to argue that on the enhancement list, we weren't looking at it in terms of only looking at people on benchmarking.
No,
So if you
somewhat.
want to look through the list and say, these are the ones that you'd have questions on,
Uh-huh.
then let's do that. But
Because
like,
we made notes on some of them that we just referred to HR for benchmarking.
Well, I didn't say, what the argument was what was on some of them, the verbiage I was using was, what was the recommendation from HR on this?
Right, but that was all based on their.
It was not all based on benchmarking. The mechanic because I remember
No,
there was the mechanic, huh?
Yeah.
There was
Mechanic was
mechanics from the sheriff's office, so I wrote my
Yeah,
notes on
that
this.
number was based on like road and bridges mechanic pay.
So for the people that said market rates, so there are people on the sheriff's where they said move based on market rates.
Correct, and then HR recommended specific steps for those positions.
And so I don't recall us saying that it was a benchmarking. Can we have them clarify? Let's just take this list, have HR clarify, were they talking about benchmarking or the people were not placed in the correct rate, or in the correct step? Because we're moving multiple steps on some of these, and I thought that's part of what those ones we're talking about.
Yeah, no, the mechanic was different because he was getting a raise or whatever it was qualified as. But right off the bat, I have a note here on technology on Bo that was benchmarked. And
Bo was said no, and
Yeah, that was a no.
that position requires so I can pull it in here and call it budget. So that, there wasn't a board discussion on a work at home. We have to address the idea of work at home and the additional costs that cost the county when they're out of the state. And so I understand looking to see if we can keep someone, but nothing about that came forward to the board to look at the increased insurance costs, the workers' compensation, and those things that impact. So I'll throw it in as a quasi-budget one. So I think that it comes in the sheriff's where there's a based on market where they're moving grades, and I think the question that we need to have them clarify is, is she calling those they weren't in the correct step, or are those based on the market? Because I would agree that if we're not going to move anybody on the market until we have an HR director take a look at that, then those ones should be paused. And at that meeting that we had, I did say, this is desirable, but this is not guaranteed.
Well, yeah, I think we've clarified that the enhancement sheet.
So it's
Any
this,
approvals were tentative.
I think
could
you're
be
looking at a different
modified.
color one. This one, go on your second one. I think this is the batches all coming to the sheriff's where that comment is, but they're
Based on
moving
market.
multiple states, and it says based on market there.
market rates,
Yeah.
market rates.
Yep.
So we want to put a hold on those?
Well, let's have her clarify that it is a market review and not a step issue, and then address that.
Yeah. I think we have to clearly separate between the two.
The one that I'm going to argue that we should leave there was Abigail and GIS, complexity of work, so they're wanting to move her. If I made that disclaimer of they have been not moved enough, that this to me isn't a market change.
Okay.
And this is one that their department had been behind for, I want to say, 2 straight years without saying anything. I think hers
Right,
should
but
stay.
Didn't we make that correction when we brought them all up last go?
She didn't get a change based on what her job was. We just moved it on last season. They got moved up, but not based on what extra work she was doing. He shifted her job is what his argument was.
Yeah, because she's now doing the work of a GIS analyst versus whatever she was
Yeah.
before.
And that's in part, and I think maybe now is a good time to discuss the idea of departments own their FTE, but not the budget portion of it. And what
Right.
is the FTE for? Because FTEs they're using the salaries, and they're just, so when someone says I'm doing more, doesn't mean that we allocated an FTE for that position. And I also would say that part of what makes us hard to attract people to even look for our jobs is people are essentially guaranteeing someone else already gets the job, versus if we were offering, for example, a work-at-home position, why is that not something that gets publicized? So, because you are saying that we're accepting a greater footprint of a potential high-quality person that we're not opening up for, because we just say someone just automatically gets it.
So addressing that, and that might not be at this meeting, but we keep talking about it, so I would like to address it. Is there a policy that we have on employees that work from home? Because we have other employees that work from home and they get stipends for things and everything else.
Yep.
And
We have
I
employees
think
that
we
don't
need
work from home and
to
get
deal with
stipends.
every one of those that work at home.
We're going to do that.
We're gonna do that. All right. It's on the radar.
Yeah.
All right.
Question. This has been noticed to be able to go into executive session and you could get rid of me and not see me for a long time.
That's a threat.
Except that it's noticed as budget workshop. We're talking on yours as personnel unless you want to treat your issue as you are wanting us to address it in next year's budget, or what you told me, which is you want it addressed now, which
Okay,
requires
so
you to
Just
notice
go
it.
talk to
So you
Veronica and
pick,
see when
you
can
pick,
get your
you
exec.
pick how I tried to help you when I talked to you and how you're trying to undo it.
She
Which
just
way?
wants it, she just wants to know it's addressed. It's,
You can wait till next year or you can wait till next week. Which one?
Next week.
Okay. I thought it through when I talked to you.
I know. I don't always listen. I'm just gonna be totally honest.
Nobody,
I'm not gonna lie about it.
are we good?
We're good. I'll shut you down. I'll go take
Okay.
care of it. Thank you.
I just, yeah, I guess for my particular department.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
You're going to push for something outside of comptroller budget, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah, because it's still part of the clerk's office and it's the clerk's purview. And it's something that we have tried to have addressed
So I will
for
tell you-
multiple years.
I know that the clerks, but in this function, are you, so this question has come up of feeling like comptroller's function is for the county
It is.
versus
Correct.
pushing one, and there's a whole group
But
of
I'm
people
still the
that
chief
don't.
deputy for the clerk, so.
But you're
I mean,
here-
I can call him in here if you would like to hear from him.
So this is part of what has been a question of feeling like certain people get harder pull. And so that's up to the board if they
Well-
want to hear that pull.
Okay.
I'm just going to say in terms of when we're having the overall view of the entire budget.
Correct.
In the function of comptroller, that's been a comment. So you choose.
So is this
Well, and I
something
would-
similar to our mechanic?
So the clerk's office has asked for desk audits for the court clerks because we all feel like they have been overlooked for at least 6 years. It was at least 6 years ago that the director of the courts asked for these adjustments to be looked at because they consistently lose positions to the prosecutor's office because the staff, the positions at the prosecutor's office are ranked higher in the grade than the court clerks, and so it's an instant promotion, right, for less work and less responsibilities. I would have the same argument for any department that came to me with this concern, to be honest, like literally. So I've had Teddy's back when it comes to her position that she has questions about. I've reached out and talked to HR about it. I have the emails from this morning that reflect that they're in support of her change, just like, so we did not, and I'm sure there's other departments that would agree, we did not list it on the enhancement list because we were told that HR would be benchmarking and making recommendations for grade changes based on the work that they did. I'm a little bit frustrated with some of that benchmarking because I feel like we did a really good job of showing that they were comparable to the positions at the prosecutor's office. But in this benchmarking, they also elevated that position. So it kind of defeats the purpose, but I understand what you guys are saying and I understand putting it on hold. I think it would make sense to, and I'll just tell you what I've kind of baselined. I took the tier 1 recommendations, I plugged it into their new, like a new hourly rate for those positions if it was recommended. I did it at the +2, just so that we were covered in our budget. You guys can make that decision when we get more information. I think we should leave it in the budget, not specifically for those roles, and it's not an automatic adjustment come 10/1, but it would definitely allow us to make those changes based, at least the money would be in the budgets to cover those changes. Once you have that definitive data from HR that you're comfortable with making.
That's the same direction. That's why I was asking to look at this. Is I do think that we need more data on how the benchmarking was performed, and we don't have the time to do that detailed review
Correct.
before we finish this budget assessment and decision making. But at the same time, I'm realizing that I don't like the process of certain groups weren't benchmarked just because they didn't ask. So it's like,
We need to look at it comprehensively.
Right.
For sure.
It's like, well, some people don't ask. I don't like this idea of, well, some people might not ask because they think they're not going to get anywhere. They don't ask because, there's a lot of reasons. And while I love advocacy, people shouldn't be overlooked if there's a problem just because somebody didn't ask. Our process should try to capture, it should be consistent and capture it all.
And the reality is that when we went to step and grade, they were plugged into the nearest step and grade to what they were currently making. It wasn't based on any, what's the word? Neutral
Achievements
data
Sure.
that would have placed them properly then. So yes, that is an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't know that we can address it all in 1 year, but we can definitely start making strides. I understand what you're saying.
So again, because we need to have a more detailed conversation with the idea of the benchmarking, when it comes to the recommendations, I don't quite understand the concept of why you would do a placement with 2 steps. Look, what's the correct placement?
Period.
That's what is the correct placement? If somebody has been misplaced and we recognize that, I can understand all the rationale and say, it's placement +1 or something to try to make up for the fact that there's been a failure for a period of time, or there's been a financial, deficit. But it feels too arbitrary to say step +1, step +2, just pick one. I agree with taking the dollar value from the step +2 as a placeholder in the budget so that as we go through and do a more detailed process and
Right.
thorough, consistent review across all departments, that as we identify that there's something that should change, we have the dollars available to do it.
Okay.
That's my position. I agree with that general approach that's been recommended. I'm not agreeing to, it should be a placement
Yes.
+2
Understood.
step. I'm just saying it's a budget
So-
amount that we can use to start with as a placeholder. I'm not agreeing with the philosophy behind.
Yes, and then Asia and I have talked that I would like the board's decision on the idea that it won't happen before this budget's produced, and it won't change any of the numbers, but as I can on the back end, I would like to pull all of the salary and benefit up to the fund level and away from departments. So, like she's saying, what we would do is they would have a dedicated number of FTEs within their department. If they needed to restructure or change something like that, they'd be coming to you asking for that additional position or the movement within their FTEs, but it wouldn't necessarily pertain to a dollar amount for that particular department. So it would also completely obliterate the process in the past where somebody says, hey, I didn't have a position filled for 6 months, I have an extra $60,000, can I buy X, right? So none of that would be happening within the departments. They wouldn't see it. And so it's gonna take me some time to move all of that on the back end, especially with payroll and the way that it posts. But if that is the board's direction, I think it's the right call. It would be my recommendation.
It sounds like the correct one. A question I had regarding that, and you may have just answered it, but also as far as this benchmarking that we may not be able to do for starting a couple months down the road and throughout all of next fiscal year, where's that money going to come from? So are we going to take some money and earmark it.
It'll be allocated to those departments as it sits now based on these recommendations. And we will move forward.
Because we've
from there.
said not to do it midterm, but yet we're gonna be doing it
Well, I
throughout
think
the
we
year.
can't do it until we get the information, period.
Yeah,
So,
but we don't wanna put them off for another year till the
Correct.
next
Yeah.
budget cycle.
And I think that not doing it midterm was a comment on how to address the initial decision a year ago versus right now we're trying to come up with a new plan. So I think it's good to clarify, I agree with you, but in my opinion, I think we have a reasonable plan that says we're anticipating having a new HR director. We want to restructure the process and method for benchmarking. And that as that data comes forward, we've allocated dollars in the budget to make corrections. And to me, that's a reasonable approach.
The difference is that you're actually budgeting for the change, and the change is not being recommended because someone came in an executive session saying change. What you're doing is you're addressing the process, recognizing that you're going to have change throughout that fiscal year. So you're trying to, as best you can, knock back some dollars to anticipate the fluctuation in the budget. Because part of the big issue is when you come mid-year and you didn't budget for knowing you were going to need the change, is you're asking for money that you didn't budget, and which means that when you presented your budget, you actually asked for more money than was needed, and you held it back, which meant it pulled away from the whole organization, versus if you look at and say, I've looked at my Milliman data, and then I've looked at my comparison of my top 5 northern counties, I can anticipate I'm gonna owe a couple of dollars for this job description. We're saying, let's put that in the budget, and then we administer it after we get confirmation of that. That's the difference. It's not,
Yeah.
and then what you're telling the organization is, directors coming in saying, I want to promote, that's not what we're doing. We're fixing the
We
year.
promote at
the end of the year,
fiscal
yeah.
year, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense
Okay.
to me too.
And then I had a question, because we have a commissioner staff, so where does that fit?
That person is included in the benchmarking.
It's in
But
the
if we're
benchmark.
not doing benchmarking, I don't know what to
Okay,
tell
I didn't
you.
know if it was a
Yeah.
benchmark issue or a raise or
Well, they
promotion issue.
benchmarked the executive assistant position across the county.
Some of these jobs, they were
that's-
giving titles and words to hit higher rates of pay. And and I've never seen organizations where it's just, you write your own job description and then we'll change. I mean, that's not, so we have to address it from a standardized process, not just how do we bump things up. So,
Well, if they fit the description,
well, I write the
Right.
description and then I give you my
well, we
rate.
should not write our own description.
But that's how this organization has
Has
done
always
job
functioned.
descriptions. So then can you give me, a job description and say I need to increase when you're giving me the titles that match, if I pull the word executive assistant out? Is my title what I would find when I look at another executive assistant in an organization that you would call commissioners like your CEO or your C-suites? That executive assistant makes quite a bit more with that title. Is it really comparable of a title that we're using, or are we just, remember, this office used to basically be everybody was a manager with 3 people. There was a manager, assistant director, and a director. All 3 people were at the top, which was the conversation with the technology of, we're just making it top heavy, which means less people to perform work. So I think it's the right thing to assess, but it's not really changing, we're fixing it but recognizing we can't fix it in a day.
Okay.
Okay.
And next on the list is the prosecutor's salary recommendations.
And so I know there's a current concern about loss of staff and being competitive in the market. We, the board, have been more involved in the process and have more data and information than we have with the other benchmarking. That said, with the anticipation of a new director coming in, I am thinking I would prefer to, again, take this dollar amount, preserve it in the budget, but not make the formal decision or change until we can do another review, more thorough review of the data. Have it be sort of the first item addressed with the new HR director within the benchmarking question, and then move to other high priority groups within the county. But I don't want to treat this differently than we treat the others.
So
I think this one is different, though. This is a huge difference in pay. And I think that this isn't about this isn't as much benchmarking as we've been so far below. I think there's some parts in this that I really don't like that we need to address, because some of these names are just growing because of a lack of other staffing, and that's creating a problem, and I think we have to address that. And that one, I'd like to go into executive session to go under to their second box, to go on the third name down, to specifically address that function. When you look at some of these rates down there and what we're getting in terms of output, and we have to have that discussion. Our ranges are not in line with legal, and in part, what has happened on the attorneys is we have consistently year over year not addressed salary across on some of these, their titles, but individual people. And individual people have increased, but not the range, and so you cannot attract people that way. And that is part of my problem on waiting, is also of how long it takes to get attracted, and they are bleeding people, and we cannot continue to not have attorneys because we have a statutory obligation for services that you're losing one, and then the person that was going to come over is likely not going to be coming over to the county, and we're
To
nowhere.
the civil side, you mean?
To the civil side, but that I'll put that part in executive session also.
So I'm coming back to, but I want to use a consistent process. And I'm not saying there isn't an issue to address, but if we need, and I think we do, to do that kind of thorough dig in and confirm what the right structure and approach is, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I'm just saying I want to use the same process that we do for any other department with this one. So how do
And
we go about that?
we can't just go, we can't just do that.
Well, you've got some, so here's the question then, because I think you've got data that shows, we do have data on this issue. This is not the same type of issue as a lower level job. This is a lot of recruiting to find someone that you can attract. They're not attracting anybody with the rates, and that's what was presented. I don't disagree that of what you're saying, but there has to be some give in how we make decisions when you look at different types, how this situation is not exactly the same as a mechanic position. This actually takes time, and we have been advertising for over a year for a position, and we don't even have an applicant to review because our rates are so far off. I think HR has given enough to show how far off we are by the comparison of the top 5 northern counties. I don't feel that it's not the most ideal situation to not be able to put it in, but I equally don't think that you can require an elected office to continue when they are a professional license required personnel to continue to wait for us to address it in the most ideal way when we have given them something that we can't attract with. That's my position on it, because
No.
even with this change, we're still going to have difficulty.
I hear what you're saying, but I think, and I don't think I said it well, but there's two different issues. The board already approved a minimum starting salary, is my understanding. We already approved the $90,000 start to try to address that, that being competitive in our local market.
And a bonus.
And the bonus. And so whether it's the signing or the relocation, so we approved that. So that piece to help address the ability to attract new hires has already been put into place, is my understanding. But the larger, what I am gonna call benchmarking, restructuring of the step and grade beyond that decision that we already made, is the piece that I'm saying I want to make sure that we use consistency with, because to me, that is a benchmarking process.
So let me ask it this way. What we already approved is what I'm just arguing that we move forward with, because we did address the opening for each of the positions. If you're not saying undo that, I'm fine.
Yes.
I thought I'm hearing you say that you want to put a pause on that, and I'm not.
No, I'm saying I want to put a pause on the larger restructure.
Okay, I don't care about
what
that.
I call
Chair
benchmarking.
placement.
Okay,
on their-
And
I
I
don't
apologize,
care.
I realized I didn't
So-
say it clearly
No,
initially.
I don't care about that.
But we already approved that initial.
Yes, okay, that's what
So
I
that's
thought you
done.
were going back on.
No, I'm not trying to
So,
reverse that
no,
decision.
So long as what we said is what we're doing, I'm fine
The
with that.
90 plus 10, we already approved.
90 plus
But it wasn't,
bonus,
and that's where I'm getting caught up. We didn't just change 90 plus 10, we got rid of level 1, and then we changed the lead, the senior, and the chief. We changed
So-
those, because we had to shift a little bit. So long
You
as
changed
the,
their baseline.
we changed the base, so if,
My understanding was the only thing we voted on, and I'm prepared to be wrong and corrected, but I believe the only thing we actually voted on was that the starting would be 90 with the $10,000 sign-on, and that we were going to look at restructuring the rest, but that we didn't actually approve a restructure for the rest yet. We only approved the 90 starting salary plus the 10 sign-on.
no, my understanding was we shifted everybody after that 90 by $10,000 for each of the different levels, because they're not just seeking the deputy prosecuting attorney, which is the 90. They need now a chief deputy prosecuting attorney, and so that person was lower than that 120. So everybody shifted.
Okay,
At the
I want to
beginning,
go back
what-
and review what we actually motioned and approved, because I don't recall it going beyond the initial 90 as far as, I know we talked about what else, but that we were going to have options looked at for
We
how to
did
do
that.
that.
That's why
And that's what
HR
this, right,
created
that's what
this
this is.
proposal.
But this is a proposal, it's not an approved, in my understanding.
And we can put this on hold and we can go into exec after. The only other thing I had on today's list was chief deputy pay and how I'm budgeting for that this year. So I think there's only 3.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to
Elected.
clarify, like I said, I'm fine if I'm wrong, just my recollection was that we only approved the initial value, that we didn't approve anything.
And I guess when you're saying initial,
The
The
90.
You're
90,
talking-
the 100, the 110, and the 120.
I'm saying just the 90. I
no.
don't remember approving anything
Can I finish my
else.
sentence? Because I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
I'm hearing what he's saying. When you're saying initial, you're only talking about one position. And what I believe we changed was we removed option, the attorney level 1, because nobody was using that. And then we changed the deputy prosecuting attorney to 90. But because when we looked at the positions, because we agreed that they had too many positions. So we removed one of the positions, and then we increased the base level position in the prosecutor's office is the deputy. We increased them to $90,000. And then when we went to the lead deputy, we increased that one to 100. And then
That's the part I don't recall.
and that's what you're saying you don't agree with, because I'm saying we changed, I agree that what I believe we changed was the base, the first step of all of the positions. And what I thought I heard you say is you want to address steps 2 through 12 in a fuller review. But then I think what you're really saying is you only recall changing one position, deputy prosecuting attorney, and adding a $10,000 signing bonus.
Correct.
And so in order to address your issue, we have to go back and listen to that, because then we'll have a problem, because he's advertising for a chief deputy, which needed an increase because we're advertising for 2. And the way they advertise it in the attorney's office, and if I recall, I think I made this comment as, they use the range of the low with the range of the high and see where their person fits when they get the application, and then decide which one of those the person would fit in. And so that's why we had to look at all of the range, because they don't say this job is 90. They're going to say 90,000 to this rate, and then they're going to tell us based on the application. But we said a sign-on bonus, that was a sign-on or relocation, however we worded that. So we have to review that to confirm their advertisement, because I believe the advertisement has already been out there with the numbers that we
Okay.
said.
Yeah, because
Okay.
like I said, just going off of my recollection, and I'm not disagreeing with, there might be a need, if I'm recalling correctly, there might be a need to make another motion and add the information, but I thought we made a basic motion, basic starting point decision on introductory salary for just that one grade, and then we were basically saying, and then now we need to go and look at the whole restructuring thing and come back and decide on that
Okay,
later.
so let's look at that. So do you want to go into executive session on,
Can we talk chief deputy pay real quick and then be done, and then we can just finish up in exec?
I wanted executive session for
For
chief
that too.
deputy pay.
Okay, perfect.
Are you ready? Okay. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to go into chief deputy pay or executive session regarding chief deputy pay and prosecutor's office, specifically addressing staff. So we'll entertain a motion.
Pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B personnel, I move to go into executive session.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes?
Commissioner Donkey?
Yes.
Commissioner Corn?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, guys.